I am arresting you right now for obstruction.
Stop that movement immediately, Officer Quinn.
Agents, secure the officer now.
Hands visible.
Drop to the floor!
Do it now, officer. Don't move that hand.
Weapon stays holstered. Let it go. Down on the floor.
If you are seeing this, drop your city and country in the comments. We want to know where people understand that true authority comes with procedural discipline. It was precisely 10:30 p.m. on a chilly Tuesday night. Officer Debra Quinn, 45, felt the familiar surge of purpose as she navigated the deserted hospital corridors. She moved with the aggressive, determined stride cultivated over 19 years of hitting the streets hard. Quinn was nearing the 2-decade mark, a tenure defined by effectiveness but also by controversy, having already cost the city treasury $4.5 million in 3 separate civil lawsuits stemming from questionable force. She walked now without a warrant, without any formal coordination, and fueled purely by a vague, desperate lead. Her focus centered on an unrelated, non-fatal shooting earlier that day. A tipster had mentioned a potential suspect, a female in her early 30s, distinctive facial features, recently involved in high-level activity. Quinn had been scanning local hospital admissions, operating on the theory that if the suspect was involved in crime, she was likely also prone to injury. The hospital records were thin, but she had used her badge in her seniority to pry loose a floor location. She believed her gut feeling, historically unreliable as it was legally, would deliver the arrest she craved. The intensive care unit door hissed open silently. Quinn stepped onto polished linoleum, the smell of sanitizer and medical decay heavy in the air. The atmosphere was immediately restrictive, demanding silence and respect, yet Quinn carried her familiar cloud of aggressive entitlement right into its center. She saw the room number she was looking for at the end of the long hall. The door was slightly ajar, casting a thin shaft of light onto the floor. Her heart rate quickened. She was ready to move. She was ready to act. She failed to perceive the silent, watchful sentinel who was already waiting for her. The end of her career was just around the corner, and she did not see it coming. Standing just outside the designated room was a man whose presence immediately radiated quiet, deliberate authority. This was Special Agent Alexei Vance, 42, a veteran assigned to the FBI's elite counter-narcotics division. Vance was dressed in expensive, tailored civilian clothing that contrasted sharply with Quinn's bulky uniform. He was positioned perfectly, blocking the entrance without appearing overtly aggressive, simply occupying the space. Vance had secured this hallway for 2 full days, coordinating complex protective custody protocols with the hospital administration and federal marshals. Vance was an expert in boundary definition. He understood that the sterile room behind him was no longer just a hospital space. It was a temporary, critical federal asset. He saw Quinn approaching, recognizing the local police uniform instantly, and felt the familiar tightening of procedural tension. Local police interference, however well-intentioned, often represented the greatest threat to complex, fragile federal operations. He braced himself, expecting professionalism, yet receiving instant hostility. Quinn arrived at the threshold and stopped, assessing the situation not with professional caution, but with immediate, dismissive judgment. She saw the man blocking the door, a black man in a suit, not uniformed police, certainly not a doctor. In her mind, prejudiced by years of unchallenged local dominance, he was low-level, a security guard, perhaps an orderly. He held no authority she felt compelled to respect. This was the moment of fatal intellectual error. She had mistakenly identified the highest level of jurisdictional authority as simple civilian obstruction, a slight she was instantly ready to remedy with force. Agent Vance stood guard over an entire federal investigation, not just a patient. For 16 agonizing months, he had meticulously dismantled a sprawling interstate smuggling ring responsible for millions in illegal narcotics. That investigation now hinged entirely on the safety and cooperation of the subject inside the room, Miss Lena Rodriguez, 31. Lena had been a mid-level coordinator, and her detailed testimony promised to indict the organization's leadership, figures who were untouchable without her explicit cooperation. 2 days prior, Lena had survived a targeted ambush. She was now post-operative, heavily sedated, and exceptionally vulnerable. Vance had personally overseen the surgical recovery, ensuring that only federally vetted medical personnel had access. The case was delicate. Any unauthorized interaction, especially one involving the aggressive questioning Quinn intended, could compromise Lena's fragile mental state, or worse, violate the terms of her protective custody agreement, potentially scuttling years of FBI effort. Vance felt the immense weight of the case pressing on him. He knew the criminals he was fighting would pay anything to silence the woman behind the door. His mission was non-negotiable: protect Lena Rodriguez at all costs. The integrity of dozens of future convictions depended on his steadfast refusal to concede ground, not even an inch, to anyone lacking proper federal clearance. This hallway was his fortress, and the small, aggressive officer approaching was merely a nuisance attempting a breach. Officer Quinn did not wait for Vance to speak. She moved her shoulders aggressively, stepping closer to the door. Her tone was demanding, sharp, piercing the quiet of the ICU. She stated flatly that the patient matched her suspect description and that she was taking charge of the scene. Her local badge, polished and prominent, seemed to glare under the hospital lights. She expected instant compliance, the usual deference shown by civilians and ancillary staff to uniformed police power. Vance reacted without heat, his movements economical. He produced his FBI credentials, a thick wallet display, and held them clearly in front of Quinn's face. He instructed her calmly, using precise, official language. "Lower your voice. This patient is under federal protective custody. You must exit the area immediately." The statement was a definitive declaration of jurisdictional superiority. Quinn glanced at the credentials, but her brain failed to process the 3 crucial letters: FBI. Her internal script had already been written. She was the authority here. She views the plain clothes and the calm demeanor as a weakness and attempted deception. Instead of recognizing the federal mandate, she saw only an obstacle. Her aggressive instinct took over. She escalated instantly, threatening to arrest Vance for obstruction of justice. This threat, captured in its entirety by the overhead security camera, sealed the termination of her nearly 2-decade career. Vance had issued the warning, establishing the federal boundary. Quinn, however, had crossed the line in her mind, viewing the situation as a personal challenge to her authority. The sterility of the ICU now felt like a cage for both of them. Vance pointed discreetly to the ceiling-mounted surveillance dome, his voice dropping slightly but maintaining absolute clarity. "Officer, review your actions. Do you truly wish to commit this act, threatening a federal agent and obstructing protective custody, on video, on what is functionally federal property?" The gravity of the warning was immense, but Quinn's procedural arrogance had reached a critical mass. She interpreted the caution as hesitation, a sign that Vance was bluffing or lacked the conviction to follow through. She ignored the camera, dismissing the surveillance as merely hospital documentation. She took the definitive, irreversible step. She reached out, grabbing Vance's forearm, intending to physically move him aside and breach the door. Vance's response was trained, immediate, and precisely calibrated. He exerted only the necessary force required to neutralize her grip. It was a swift, measured control technique designed to release her hold without causing injury, a maneuver performed thousands of times in training scenarios. The physical contact startled Quinn deeply. She was unused to being denied, much less physically restrained, by anyone she perceived as beneath her rank. The shock immediately curdled into raw, unprofessional fury. The moment of physical contact shifted the confrontation from a procedural dispute into a dynamic threat. Humiliated by Vance's easy disengagement and blinded by rage, Officer Quinn's hand instinctively drifted toward her right hip. It was a movement that began slowly, an emotional reflex, but its trajectory was undeniable. Her fingers brushed the molded polymer grip of her service weapon, initiating the pull sequence. This action, captured in pristine high-definition footage, marked the absolute point of no return. Vance saw the movement instantly. His demeanor shifted from calm authority to immediate professional danger. He did not need to draw his own weapon. He needed only to initiate the lockdown. Before Quinn's thumb could release the safety strap, the silent support system that Vance had meticulously established came alive. Two figures materialized seemingly out of the shadows of the end of the hall. They were FBI tactical agents, part of Vance's protective detail, previously indistinguishable from the silent hospital backdrop. They moved with frightening speed, converging simultaneously on Quinn's location. Before she could process the sudden appearance of overwhelming force, the two agents had her boxed in, hands raised, providing a definitive, hard stop. Quinn froze, her fingers still hovering near the weapon, the realization hitting her with crushing clarity. She was now the subject of a federal incident, her attempted arrest having turned into her detention. The image of the uniformed officer frozen by plainclothes federal agents, her aggression instantly neutralized, was the climactic, devastating frame of the whole incident. The cleanup was swift and procedural. Within 15 minutes, Detroit Police Commander Howard Mills, a man known for his rigid adherence to procedural law, was standing in the hospital corridor, summoned by Vance's measured, official phone call. The tension in the hallway was palpable, only broken by the hushed whispers of hospital administrators who now understood the gravity of the scene. Mills demanded to see the footage immediately. They moved to a sterile viewing room where the high-definition security video played out the entire 90-second confrontation. The raw emotion on Quinn's face as she threatened arrest, her physical assault on a federal agent, and the undeniably hostile movement toward her sidearm, it was all laid bare. The truth was undeniable, captured from multiple angles. There was no ambiguity, no context that could excuse her actions. Commander Mills, his face grim, stepped out and issued the order instantly. Officer Debra Quinn was ordered to surrender her sidearm, her handcuffs, and her badge, effective immediately. Her 19-year career, already burdened by massive liability, was terminated on the spot for gross insubordination and the attempted assault of a federal officer. Quinn stood stunned, the shock of her professional demise overwhelming her previous rage. She realized her arrogance had not only cost her livelihood, but had handed a major liability victory to the very system she thought she dominated. The outcome secured by Vance's unwavering defense of jurisdictional lines was monumental. Lena Rodriguez, kept safe and secure, provided the crucial testimony that dismantled the entire criminal organization, leading to 11 major federal convictions. The video of Officer Quinn's disastrous miscalculation was stripped of all identifying features and implemented as mandatory training material across every major U.S. police department, a permanent, stark record of what happens when procedural arrogance supersedes the boundaries of authority. It became the definitive cautionary tale regarding the sacred separation of local and federal power. The system operated exactly as designed, prioritizing the integrity of a massive federal case over the self-serving aggression of one local officer. Vance walked away victorious. Quinn walked away permanently ruined. Do you think justice was served in the cold, clear light of procedural law? Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment for more episodes. Thank you.